is going to be working with me. Jean, if you want to come up to the mic and introduce yourself, talk a little bit. She's going to help co-facilitate this session.
Good afternoon. My name is Jean Bonander, and it's my pleasure to be here with you and work with the council and the community and Brad to help you frame a group of big issues. And the purpose today is not to solve these issues, but to lay out as many of the ideas, comments, and questions as you will have. And action steps will occur further in this process. Just by way of background, I have 20 years of city management experience in Marin County. And since then, I've been doing work with a number of city councils and staff on strategic planning, foresight efforts, and goal setting. In addition, I do executive evaluations for local government. My current clients include the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority. I was their first executive officer and continue to work with that entity. I also work with Marin Clean Energy, which is a California community choice aggregation, the first in the state to provide power other than PG&E. And I'm also the executive director of the California Streetlight Association, which sounds thrilling, of course, but primarily what we work on are rates and tariffs to try and keep electric costs low for cities and counties in California. Today, my job is to keep track of your comments, your ideas and questions, and to work with Brad to help facilitate and make sure that everyone is heard. And to that end, we would ask that you let Brad or I call on anyone who wishes to speak, and if you could raise your hand or otherwise indicate that you wish to make comments, both council members and members of the community, that would be very helpful for the reasons that the mayor stated, that the meeting is being recorded and you want to make sure that everyone's voice is heard. And Brad and I will do everything in our power to make sure that everyone who wants to speak has an opportunity to do so. In addition, we encourage you, just from a process standpoint, to come at these discussions from a platform of curiosity. There's a terminology called appreciative inquiry, which is curiosity-based, which is when you are hearing something, sharing information, to do so from a position of wanting to learn more, and it is very, very helpful if you use phrases like "what if," "what about," or "tell me more" if clarification is necessary. And then the mayor and Brad, a question for you. Do you want people to talk throughout, to ask questions as they arise? Do you want to give the various presentations for the three topic areas and hear questions and comments after each topic? So just in terms of framing the discussion, how it might occur.
Yeah, and thank you, Jean. I'll outline that in my presentation, at least how I envision it. But this is our first study session, and I'll talk through how we got here. But it's really something that we want to adapt to the community. So I think the next one, and we're going to be looking at a series, we can do a little differently. So I'm definitely open to feedback in terms of how these meetings could improve. But thank you, and I'll just give a short, hopefully 5-minute presentation. We do have a few members of the public and organizations that have requested to make presentations, so we'll fit those in. And then it's really intended to be an open dialogue, with the community. So I'll walk through that. And I think, I don't know where you're going to be, but I know there's boards all over. So I guess you're going to be floating and scribing. So
I'm going to be starting over here, and I have pens in the three colors of the three topics that you'll be talking about today. So I'm hoping that I can help you keep track of which comments are related to which items with the color scheme. So thank you very much. It's my
You're welcome.
pleasure
Thank
to be
you.
here.
Thank you. All right, so you can go to the next slide. So how we got here, I've now been the town manager for just over 90 days, so 3 months. And, and prior to me, as you know, my neighbor or my friend and neighbor, Steve Rogers, did this job for a long time. And so I'm thankful to have his, insight and input. And I think you all know that, obviously the council members, a number of them were elected and appointed in this past year. So as we've gotten to know each other, the first thing that I addressed was what was referred to as protocols, which I generally kind of categorized as governance. And there was a number of issues that we discussed, and those mainly got resolved through what we're referring to now as the council handbook. And the council handbook is a public document. There was a number of things in there, but one of the issues that we addressed was how we receive public comment as a community, and through the meetings. And so we made a distinction between formal meetings and informal meetings or special meetings. Formal meetings being, the town council meetings where we go through obviously a process of voting and making decisions, and then the study sessions. To quote the handbook, are a type of special meeting that is less formal and open to public interaction. It also is to review one or few items that require more in-depth study, to receive information/reports that require no formal action, and then finally that public comment can be adapted for the meeting environment to promote more dialogue with the community. So those are generally the ideas behind the study sessions. But since this is our first one, I'm actually very curious to see how it will go, and I will, along with Jean, try our best to read the room and see who wants to talk and what have you. But it isn't like put in a speaker slip or wait for the mayor and you come up and have 5 minutes. I think, the only challenge, because we are videotaping it, is to make sure that your voices are recorded. But I also think we can adapt, and we've even talked about using, I know in the past the community center or the Heritage Room has been used, and we intend to have another one at the first Tuesday of November. And this is leading to what will become goal setting for the council, and we haven't really gone through that. That was started before I got here, and then we sort of separated that conversation between the protocols. We got through that, and now we're leading into goal setting. And so the intent is to start that with Jean on the first Tuesday of December, and then in a more traditional sort of half-day, full-day format, depending on what we hear and decide, in January we will actually have a goal-setting day, and that's a traditional thing that councils do before you start budgeting, because then it's the job of the staff, of course, to present a budget which is in line with the goals of the council and the community. So, and then I write rinse and repeat, which is generally like, this is how local government works, right? Is we go through an annual budgeting or a biannual budgeting process, and that's always dependent on what goals the community establishes through their elected leaders and the appointed boards and commissions that advise them. So we chose 3 really big topics, and I do think when you look at that, when you look at health, climate, and safety, there's clearly a lot of overlap. So sort of the classic Venn diagram, a lot in there. So it's this opportunity for ideas to be proposed, and then as we work through goal setting, we decide sometimes through this process of elimination of what do we have resources for, because although we all want to save the world and have the safest and healthiest towns, resources are always finite, and it's something we have to manage, and again, typically through budgeting, adopt it ultimately and then implement. So that's how we got here. Next slide. We're going to go through the three subjects. I'm just going to give some quick bullets. And then I know, again, there's 2 presentations, perhaps 3, that have been requested. But it's really an opportunity for all of you to interact. I'll do my best with Jean to call people up to the mic. But feel free to stand up or wave your hand if you have something to say. And if there's a lot of people, we can, in some cases, form a line. There's different ways to manage depending on the demand. But safety, the obvious thing, and we do have both we have our fire chief, Chief Marcucci, and then we have our sergeant through the sheriff's office, Sergeant Malat, that are in the room, and we're fortunate to have an extremely safe town. When you look at the crime stats and all of the data, it's a beautiful place to live and work, and we're fortunate for that. I also think when you look at streets, and we could talk about a lot of things, Yountville is got a lot going for it in the form of safety. So we really need to celebrate. And I see that Whitney from the Chambers here. We've talked about promoting safety as really something. As we all know, sort of cities and destinations are now not always safe. So we're fortunate to have a safe community like Yountville, both as residents and visitors. But there's been a lot of discussion around emergency preparedness. I mean, clearly, although I'm not from the Valley, I'm aware and witness to some of the issues, particularly with fires and floods and earthquakes. So our goal as a town, and we're in the process of doing that through a series of educational workshops, is to educate, inform, communicate. There are things we can do to invest in resiliency and community. This is the idea of us all supporting each other and sort of knowing your neighbor. I know this is one of the more recent things we've been promoting. And then being a participant and in some cases a leader in the region. Because a lot of this, does fall into the climate discussion, climate action. And if you can go to the next slide. We are working alongside the county. The county is really leading this county climate action plan, which is, we have members of what they call the CCAC, which is the Climate Action Committee. The town did adopt a climate action plan in 2016. The broad categories are listed here. And a lot of these are policy decisions, and I'd say carrot and stick. I mean, generally you can use incentives. You can also adopt ordinances and use enforcement. Both of them have trade-offs, but I think we use both to some extent. We then get into how we budget, which is our capital improvement program. We call our CIP, and then our operating budget, and then our practices as the town and what we do. And you see our new, we call it the GEM car, our new electric fleet that we're investing in and making the town walkable, bikeable. These are all things that, of course, are related back to the climate. And then finally, health, which is another huge subject. We're going to be giving out a proclamation on clean air tonight. We talk about complete streets. A lot of this is all about exercise and good health. Our Park and Rec staff does a great job of programming our facilities and creating events, access to healthy food. A lot of people like to use body, mind, and spirit as kind of this idea of community coming together. And then Blue Zones, I think Kelly is going to lead off our presentation, so I'll just kind of finish up here and introduce Kelly. And then if you can go to the last slide, my thought on how we manage today is that we'll start with health, and Kelly can kick it off, and we can try to have a dialogue about health, whatever issues people want to talk about in that subject. And then I know Christy Pistoni's here from Up Valley Waste, and we can kind of transition then into more of the green circle, and I think there might be a member of the community here that wants to talk about single-use plastics, so we can kind of transition to climate, talk about whatever we need to there, and then end with safety. And I know that both Chief and Sergeant are available for questions, but I've asked them, unless they want to, they don't have to make a presentation. I know they present in front of council a lot. So that's the format of the day. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, we can get Kelly started. And we're trying to limit people's presentations to 5 minutes. We're not going to keep you on the timer, but if you can do your best to can go through those so that we can have a opportunity for the community to share their ideas. Thank you. Okay, we're not seeing any questions, so come on up.
Good afternoon, Council. Thank you so much for having me here today. My name is Kelly Bond. I'm the Public Policy Advocate with Blue Zones Project, and our office is in St. Helena, just up the road, but we cover Upper Napa Valley as our project geography, and so we are from Yountville north to Calistoga. Now, we've met with a few of you, but it's nice to meet the rest of you in person today. Thank you for having me. And so I will talk about our 3 different policy areas very briefly, and really just the main projects that we're working on or will be soon working on as it relates to Yountville. And so we have 3 policy areas. I've got some notes on my phone here, so I'm looking down at those. But built environment, so Brad already alluded to walkability and bikeability. So when we were talking about the built environment, there's a lot of those components, as well as we look at affordable housing, we'll look at zoning and land use, parks. The first item I'll talk about is related to parks. So built environment, food policy, and tobacco policy. Those are our 3 policy areas. And so I'll just very briefly share a couple projects in those areas. And I have a fun handout for the first one, and that's the only visual I brought. But this one's exciting. Okay, so the first one, and this will be coming to you at council soon. I don't know that there's a date yet, but we've, for many months, been working with a graphic designer and in heavy partnership with the Parks and Recreation Department. Thank you, Samantha. To design for Yountville a town parks and walking map, as well as some trail marker signage that will be adhered to your existing wooden posts throughout the town. And so that is a big project. It's gone through Parks and Recreation Commission. We've gone to them several times. They have signed off on both items that are before you. And so we'll be coming to council soon for any feedback on that and to help move that forward. Once the signage is installed and the maps are finalized and printed, a couple of them, we'll be working with the Chamber of Commerce to train their Welcome Center volunteers as ambassadors to help visitors and residents alike use the system and understand that this is available. And then Brad also mentioned Complete Streets, so switching to a different project. We did get approval on a consultant to support some Complete Streets work for you all. So he should be reaching out to me soon, and then I'll be in touch to help with Complete Streets policy integration. So that's something we'll be working on with you all. And then tentatively, we need to do some demonstration projects. We do 2 in each of the communities that we work in. So we've done one in Yountville already, and we're looking for a second. And so we were possibly brainstorming maybe a bike corral, some kind of a temporary project like that. So that one is a little TBD, but yeah, we're exploring what a demonstration project could look like. So we're open to ideas, and I'm happy to expand on what a demonstration project entails, if that's helpful. So those are our built environment policies. And do you want me to pause for questions or just go? Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have any questions on any built environment stuff? Go ahead.
I am wondering what Complete Streets entails.
Okay, so Complete Streets is typically a street is complete when it's designed for all road users. So we're making sure that not only does the single occupancy vehicle have space to drive, but the pedestrians of all ages, young kids to older adults, anyone with mobility issues, they have, the curb ramps that are ADA compliant and all of that stuff. Are there bike lanes or separated paths or something that makes it safe, again, for bikers of all ages and abilities to use? And so that's typically considered a complete street when you're looking at all different road users and making sure they can use the road safely.
Okay. It does not refer to some of the streets that we have that do not go through, or dead ends that could be completed.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Did you have anything else, Councilman? Same question.
And if you want to add to, that's my off-the-cuff definition, Brad. But
I think that's it. I mean, obviously, streets are evolving. I think the thing you're seeing in Yountville and a lot of communities is, golf carts or electric vehicles, and it is in essence trying to design streets. You're always limited by right-of-way, but to provide, they say, multimodal forms of transportation. So there's a lot to it. There's a lot of engineers that really specialize in complete street work, and so it's definitely something that you're seeing throughout the world, truthfully. So.
And the infrastructure that's in place will depend on things like the speed limit. If it's a pretty slow street, you don't need a protected bike lane. But if it's a 40-mile-an-hour street, I would say you definitely want some kind of a protected bike lane. So Yountville is a very walkable, pretty bikeable community. So I think your streets are well on their way, if not, complete already. But I think there's always room to take another look and see what we can do in the policy space to ensure for years to come that they are.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Kelly. I just want to show that, I know it's far distance here, but type of signage that maybe you're circulating is walking signage that gives directional to community facilities, the distance you're walking, and so, and how many minutes to that. So if you were, I guess, walking the community, you could track the distance you walked. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And there's also little icons if a space allows bikes. So if it's a multi-use trail, or if dogs are allowed. So there's I know it's small in there, but there's those other icons as well. Thank you.
Yeah, and I know the map is being passed around. So, and I also know that this has been tracking along with the Park and Rec Master Plan that Sam's been working on. So I think the council will officially see it when that comes before you, which I know we're working towards the end of the year to have that presentation. And I also know, I haven't seen it yet, but I at least heard through Whitney, there is one of the volunteers at the visitor center that's keeps like walking and hiking and whatever, because a lot of people come to the visitor center. So it's just a tool for people to understand, and I think for residents, I mean, I obviously live here now and walk around often, so it's a great town to walk through, and having paths and having goals of whether it's a mile or 2 miles or 3 miles, whatever your goal is important. So we thank you for that work. I guess I'd like to open it up to anyone else that might want to either come up to the mic or have something to say.
Do you want me to run through the food and tobacco really quickly?
Oh, sorry, of course, yeah. Finish.
I wasn't sure if you wanted to do it.
I thought you were winding down, but
yeah. They're shorter sections. I'll be very brief. So in the food policy space, we've been working with county partners to do a countywide food policy audit. So looking at food policies that exist in all sorts of spaces. So within school districts, within work sites, lots of different places, and that would provide, once it's done, specific recommendations for Yountville. So that's something that is coming. And then I've been working with Hillary on potentially some nutrition standards for the town. So still working on those, but to provide some healthy food standards. Hillary's been great and had developed her own, all on her own, went above and beyond. And so we're just seeing if there's any other changes that could make it even better. And then tobacco, I'll just note that you all, just as a town, updated your special event permit to include smoke-free requirements in all public spaces for events. So if someone wants to apply for a special event, that permit now includes smoke-free language. So that was really exciting to have that updated for the town. So not really an enforcement change of any kind, but just your parks are already smoke-free, but just hopefully that event organizer will then see that checkbox. It needs to be smoke-free, and we'll do their own enforcement there. And I think that's all I have to say. So I'm happy to answer questions from the public or step away.
All right. Any other questions for Kelly? Yeah, come on up.
Can you speak into the mic, please?
Oh, hi, Penny Proto.
You can move that so they can hear you in TV land, close to you.
You're good. Me moving closer did. Okay. Penny Proto, 1971, Yountville Crossroad. And I love the walking map. I love showing all the parks. But there are two areas that we use a lot, the community uses and visitors use, and that's the Fennell Loop. That would be nice, and I know part of it is not in town. And the same thing holds true with Yountville Road, which is just a beautiful walking trail. And I don't know if there's any way it can be somehow, I don't know if you can protect those from not becoming a busy street. Right now they aren't, and it's lovely. It's a really wonderful way to get a little extra exercise. So that's it.
Thank you. Yes, come on up.
My name is Michael Bork, and I'm a resident. I just wanted to add that as a frequent walker of dogs, that I don't know if it's possible to do it, but if we could figure out a way to inform the tourists that are coming here that have put themselves on bicycles for the first time in 10 years, that they shouldn't be on a sidewalk. I run across them a lot and try to move out of the way, that sort of thing, but it is really not appropriate, and it is safe enough most of the time for them to be on the road. So I don't know how that's done, maybe through some sort of signage or something, since you're going to be adding that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. I have noticed that as well.
So
Sidewalk etiquette is always a big, big at least deal for me.
Brad, so it currently is illegal,
Yeah.
and so I, if I see somebody riding on the sidewalk, I kind of let them know that. But in addition, I point them to where the paths are. So our paths are much wider, and bicycles are allowed there, just so everybody here knows that.
Yeah, go ahead, Marla.
I was going to wait for safety to bring up the bicycle safety and more instructions, but leaving Rancho today, I looked left for walkers, and there was nobody there, and looked right, and some bikes were coming. And then I went to pull out, and on the sidewalk from Hotel Yountville came 2 bikes that out of nowhere. And so I was like, you guys might want to get off the sidewalk, but and the wrong side of the street to boot. So we definitely, since we only have Washington Street for our main thoroughfare, we definitely need directional signage there. And if we're talking about smoking, I do think we need cigarette trash cans at our parks, certainly at the Veterans Park. A lot of drivers sit there and wait for their passengers, and the granite there, the crushed granite, is full of cigarette butts.
Yeah. Councilmember.
While we're on the bike topic, I know adults.
Can you move your mic forward so we can hear you?
One of my pet peeves, apart from riding on the sidewalk, is I know it's not illegal for adults not to wear helmets, but I just always think to myself, what a way to end your vacation when I see people who haven't been on a bike for 3 years riding down the street and looking for a head injury, basically. So I thought maybe a sign down by the market or something that just said something friendly like wear a helmet, have a good vacation, because that's really scary. Anyway, and I also see Officer Malott, a sergeant in the back.
Come on up.
Come on up.
Come on up, Sergeant.
So currently, and I might go to Gary to, I don't know which mic is
Yeah, this one's better.
might go to Gary to get clarification, but we do not enforce bicycle riding on the sidewalk currently because the town, it's not codified in an ordinance in the town. State law does not, from what I've researched in the past, does not prohibit bicycle riding on a sidewalk. Each individual municipality has to have a specific ordinance. I don't believe we have an ordinance. We have had discussions just at the office. There are times when, I'll tell you, I ride on the sidewalk because I feel safer if I do it in a safe manner. Also, children in town is a good example of I'd prefer children on the sidewalk. So we will, if someone's riding in a reckless manner, we'll stop them from doing that. But again, as it currently stands, and maybe Gary can research or something we can look into more.
Yeah, I need to follow up. I have not looked at that specific question on the municipal code or otherwise, so happy to do it if the council would like.
Yeah, I think those are all good follow-up items. You know, it's interesting. Yesterday, Sergeant Malott and I overlapped. I had a meeting with the Vine Trail with Chuck and the executive director. And what I heard from them, you know, is the Vine Trail's dealing with, you know, the bigger issue I think there is the motorized bikes or the pedal, you know, all the sort of technology that's now happening there. But they are passing out not citations, but information leaflets, I'll call them, which advise people of what they can and can't do on the Vine Trail. So there is an information campaign piece to this that we can talk about, and then we can get into the enforcement thing. But those are all, you know, really good comments, so I appreciate it. Come on up, Kim.
Hi, Kimberly Cook. I've only been here like 20 minutes, but I've already heard 4 recommendations for more signs in town. And I think I hear Snickers behind me. This town has so many signs. I think signs just makes it more confusing. Since most of these people that are doing these things on bikes are picking them up at hotels or the bike rental shop, is there some way to get them to hand out instructions as to what's expected from the bike riders in town, and that they should be having helmets, or, you know, asking them to participate more in town?
Yeah.
I think as part of the whole scene makes it much better. Steve's always had another idea of having them collect like a rental fee or something, a little additional fee, and place it towards the bike trail fund, the Vine Trail Fund. But that's a whole nother discussion. But I don't know that we need more signs. But I think the people that are using the bikes could be a little more responsible.
Yeah.
And if we
They
can
shouldn't have to sign a
enforce
waiver.
that through the place where they're getting the bikes, that would be ideal.
Yeah, all good comments. And I have heard the sign clutter, you know, and so you can see, at least with the sign, the wayfinding that's being passed around, it's intended to complement existing posts, so not having new posts. So that was thought of, and I do agree that there is a point in time where too many signs creates a visual impact that's something we should always consider. So, okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Just briefly, thank you for the comments about bicycles, but as usual, the things are always more complicated. I think one of our challenges is that in Yountville, on Washington Street between California Boulevard and Mulberry, that's a busy street with parked cars, and if I had children on that street riding bikes, I'm concerned about traffic there. But as you get anywhere else in the community, so maybe it's just this trying to remind people that as early as at Rancho now, our path behind West America Bank gets you off the street and down and north in a much safer manner. So it's through the bicycle, where they're renting bikes, or the hotels, giving people more information about our paths that are off the streets, and then we're not creating more signage, but also reducing risk in that stretch between California Boulevard and Mulberry. Anyway, thank you.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Why don't we transition into the green circle? And I know, Christy, if you want to come up now. Do we have a PowerPoint that Christy provided? Oh, we don't have it? Give me that. I didn't save it, if that's what. But I know you sent it.
Yeah.
Sorry, why don't you?
You were copied.
Do you need the PowerPoint, or should we pause on this and come back to it after we find it, or do you want to just?
I can run through like a brief of our processes with composting, recycling, trash, and if you want to touch on.
Yeah, I mean, I think, as you know, this is intended to be a broader kind of conversation. So if you can do that, that would be great. And however, we're trying to limit to 5 minutes, so the best you can do. I appreciate it.
My name's Christy Pistoni with, I'm actually officially with Waste Connections, and I'm Director of Government Affairs for the state of California. Lexi Mangola is one of our community outreach recycling coordinators, and she's one of our members that goes around and meets with nonprofits and schools and business owners and just about any group or person that needs a little extra input. And so I was going to let her talk about the basic services and programs that we're doing, and then I was going to chat a little bit about SB 54.
Okay, great. Love to hear about that.
Hello. So I'll just run through. It's not as exciting without the pictures, but basically I was just going to talk a little bit about how our composting works and then our recycling. I think just a brief overview of everything helps everybody to get a better picture of how the actual process works. And then just kind of some other ordinances we've been dealing with we can go through. But as far as the compost, so we collect everything in the trucks. It gets taken back to our St. Helena facility. And then we have a few employees that are then sorting through all of the garbage and contamination that we receive in the compost carts. And then it is being grinded up, put onto the blowers and then put over with compost, and then being oxygen running through it to turn it into compost. And then that is what we are, reselling into the community. As far as recycling, same thing. The trucks go around. It gets taken to our sorting facility, where we take out the pre-sorting. We're taking out all of the trash contaminants, and everything that isn't recyclable. And it's then going on a further sorting line where we are sorting it by material type. And then it all gets baled and, pushed out to go to the buyers that are then actually recycling the material. So as far as contamination in the compost, the main thing that we're seeing is we get a lot of plastic bags. We can't take any of the compostable material or the organics in any plastic bags. So that's a big contaminant. We get a lot of coffee cups. We don't take any of the paper products that are lined with any plastic lining. So any of that material is a big contaminant. As well as like the BPI plastics, the BPI compostable plastic. We don't take any of that material. So that is big contaminant within our compost stream. And then as far as recycling, we're seeing a lot of, again, the plastic bags, which we cannot recycle, a lot of the flimsy plastics, a lot of that BPI compostable plastic. It is actually trash. So we're getting a lot of that contamination in there. So I think that's kind of the main things. And then with some other local ordinances that we've been working with, I think as far as, foodware, we only are taking organic fiber materials. So like I said, we cannot accept any of that BPI material. So it's a lot of that clear plastic, quote unquote, compostable plastics. We aren't taking any of that in our compost stream. So there's a lot of greenwashing that go on there. So all of that goes into the landfill here. So it's just all fiber, natural fiber products that we can take. None of the plastic lined coffee cups. We can't take any of that in the recycling or the compost. So it's a little bit different. So when it comes to the to-go foodware, we have a little bit different sorting process up here than in other jurisdictions. So, yeah, I think that is the main thing. And then if you want to talk about...
Christy has some information to pass out.
I don't know if it's okay if I can leave it here on the table or I can send it down and...
However you want to do it. If you can just make it available to the council, and then...
Oh, you do have it now?
Well, let's not start over. Let's get into SB 54 because I know that's a hot topic at the state level.
You have a question?
So the SB 54 was a bill that was created by Senator Ben Allen and passed in 2022, and it's just basically a reformation on packaging and packaging being sold in California. And so there's a little bit of a timeline. Right now we're in the informal rulemaking. There's been lots of workshops allowing us to get to know what SB 54 is about and how we're going to implement it. And it's probably the biggest change that we've seen in our industry. I wouldn't say it goes beyond 939 and it goes beyond 1383 because it's really for the first time we're getting into what's called EPR, extended producer responsibility. So for the first time, the packaging manufacturers will be responsible for manufacturing packaging that's either recyclable or compostable. And if they're not manufacturing materials that meet the specifications of this law, they ultimately will have to pay more. So they will have like taxes put on their products. And so ultimately they're just getting squeezed into reforming to what California is going to allow. So with that, one of the things that happened earlier this year in July is this is the first time we've had an advisory board that is going to be attached to the SB 54 rulemaking process and maybe even moving forward. There is a producer responsibility organization, and they're sort of the middleman between the packaging and where the material is being collected. So if it's being collected from the recycler, or it could also be collected, there's new places emerging because SB 54 also has a refill and reuse component. It hasn't really been developed in California. That's part of what we're doing right now. And so we're going to see a whole nother part of SB 54 with reuse and refill. In any event, Cal Recycle will be picking the PRO by the end of this year. So 1st of January, we'll know who the producer responsibility organization will be, and then we'll move into more formal rulemaking. There are 14 people on the advisory board. I was lucky enough to apply and be accepted, so I'll be one of 2 individuals representing the recycling industry. I have a colleague representing the composting industry. I have a colleague representing organic packaging, and then the rest is made up of packaging manufacturers and also local jurisdictions. There is a director of the Alameda County stopwaste.org. I sent you guys a link to the PowerPoint that's going on tomorrow, and it's all about the 101 of SB 54. So if you didn't get it, maybe you can share it with everyone. I think I sent it a couple weeks ago. Anyway, the timeline is fairly aggressive for all of this, and hopefully by 2032, we will be at 100% packaging, either recyclable or compostable or not sold in California.
Thank you very much. Very exciting. I'm glad that I worked a lot on that too when I was on the Cal City's Environmental Quality Committee. So it's finally here and it's law. So very excited about that. Thank you.
Councilmember Reeves, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question or two for the previous speaker. You mentioned the BPI compostable bags, and I would like to clarify what is not one of the ones that you refused to take, because we got a roll of bags to line the compost bin with the compost bin.
Yes, my bad.
Were those the right bags or the wrong bags?
Yes, we do have an exception for the bags. We'll take the BPI, 100% BPI certified bags, just as we realize it's difficult to collect the organic waste and anything else. So we do accept that is the one exception for the 100% BPI material.
So what happens to them in your composting process? Do they actually compost?
Yeah, those break down pretty easily. I guess the harder issue is like the clear cups, or the silverware or the foodware. That's when it's a little bit harder to break down. The bags, I mean, you can see them breaking down even in your can. So those are, we do accept those. Yeah.
The other question is that I understood that your facility was contracting with Napa to take those compostable silverwares, that they had some way to grind them up and do something with.
As of right now, our commercial food waste, that is being processed in Napa. As far as residential and our larger green cans, those are all still going to our facilities. But the commercial food waste cans are being processed in Napa.
So all those cups that are clear that say they're made out of corn or whatever, and the same with the silverware, those belong in the trash can?
Yes, if you're residential, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I thought it would be important to know why composting is so important. I don't know if you've done more informational things in town or not, but it seems like that component of composting will make a huge difference environmentally for greenhouse gas. So maybe if you could touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. So 1383 is a a main part of what we're working on with the community is enforcing SB 1383. The whole, I guess, goal is a greenhouse gas reduction bill. So mainly what we're prioritizing is composting all of our organics rather than landfilling them. So that includes all of your food waste, food soiled paper, like paper towels, napkins, paper plates, things like that. Rather than putting it into the landfill, we compost it. Reason being, the landfill, we're compacting all of the material, so there's no oxygen getting in there. So there's some statistic that I think like a head of lettuce will take up to 7 years to decompose in a landfill just because there's no oxygen, there's nothing breaking it down. And so that's what creates the methane that is then being released from the landfill. So when you compost it rather than landfilling it, there's no methane being released. We're pushing oxygen through the material and breaking it down and then turning it back into a soil amendment that we can then reapply to our soils here. So it is definitely a lot better to get that in your compost so we can actually capture it and compost it, because when it gets thrown in the landfill or your landfill carts, we're not digging through those. It's going in the landfill. So
I'll just add one little piece if I can. We're working in conjunction with RCD, Napa Conservation Resource District, and Miguel Garcia there is helping us to promote the compost to local farmers who have not had any, have not worked with compost before, and we're moving into this carbon farming. So actually by using the compost back into their farming practices, we're actually sequestering carbon. So that's another additive. Not only are you getting all of this great organic matter, but you're also sequestering carbon at the same time.
All right. Any other questions or comments before we go to the next?
Got one.
Come on.
Penny, resident. I'm just curious what the market is for recycled plastic. Is there a market? Are there people buying?
Can you speak into the mic, please?
Are they buying recycled plastic? Is there a market for that, or cardboard, or is it just warehoused? There is.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Just about the market. One thing that we're marketing right now is all of the fibers moving, all of the papers moving. We are processing PET, which is number 1, HDPE number 2, all colors. We actually separate them by their color type. There's a little more value when we remove all of the like milk jugs because they're clear, and that means they can be made into a new product that is a new color added when you mix all your detergent and juice boxes and things like that, bottles, they come out to be brown, and it's more of an industrial type product that's made. We also do, because of the wine industry, we're doing a lot of industrial type plastic. So all of the film wrap from the wineries, all of the drip irrigation is being processed. We also have what's called mixed rigid plastic. So that's bigger stuff like your 5-gallon buckets and chairs and kind of bigger items. All of that's moving. What SB 54 is going to cover is everything else. So all of that flimsy packaging, your Amazon bags, your cottage cheese, yogurt, Ziploc bags, any kind of bag, candy wrappers, anything that has a plastic component to it will be counted as part of SB 54.
Is that including single-use plastics?
Single-use plastics, too.
I read an interesting article in the New York Times recently that was an eye-opener to me that, all the symbols, the triangle with the number in it, a lot of that, like you were saying, yogurt containers aren't really recyclable. And so is that really what the core of this SB 54 is, to make, like you said, that's kind of greenwashing? Because I actually have been trying to recycle those, and I thought, well, it has a number, it must be recyclable.
So before the 2018, so CalRecycle imposed all of these laws and requirements on us, but they didn't let us build infrastructure in California or really the West Coast. We had fiber and we had the basics, but for a long time, the Asian markets were taking our mixed plastic and they would say, all of that, mix flimsy stuff, put it in a bale and ship it over there, and we'll make something out of it. And there wasn't a requirement even to follow up to see what they were doing with it. So as part of SB 54, the responsible end markets have to be tested. They will be certified. You can't just sell to anyone. You're going to have to sell to people that are in the pros group. So that's going to solve one of the problems. Also, the truth in labeling, which is a bill that was passed last year that's coming around, I guess, this next year. You can't put the arrow on something if there isn't a pathway for it to truly get made back into something else. That's also coming into this SB 54. So the same with compostability. Basically, if anything looks like plastic, it is plastic. It's a form of it. Okay, you can't tell me a clear lid on a fiber bowl isn't plastic. PLA is part of a plastic, and it's got stuff in it. Our compost that we're making has been certified organic with OMRI and CDFA for over 30 years, and we're putting our materials, your materials, back into these vineyards right next door. And the last thing they want is contamination, and the last thing you want is to eat food or drink wine out of contaminated compost. So we're slow. I know it seems like a slow time, but the momentum is growing. The legislation has passed many bills to ban PFAS this last go around, and the packaging industry now has to be responsible.
So basically, if it looks like plastic, we'll be able to recycle it when 54 is completely enforced.
It probably will not be sold in California.
Unless
if
it could be.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and we're also aligning with the other states that we neighbor with. So this isn't like brand new stuff for California. At the same time, Oregon, Washington, Colorado are all passing the same sort of legislation. The thing that's carved out of it, not to complicate it even more, but our bottle bill. So anything that's in the bottle bill is not part of SB 54. Any medication, any veterinarian supplies, any what do you call it, like Ensure or supplements, anything for diet and health and is removed from SB 54. So we're really getting into, flimsy little packaging type stuff.
Christy, that's really helpful.
Can you quickly, is there any kind of a simple way that we can all remember, if you look at those, I call them chasing triangles on the back, is there a number in there? Is like 1, 2, and 3 are okay and the rest are not? Or is there any kind of simple?
We always go back to right now is it a container? Is it a container? Does it feel like a container? Does it hold something? That's how I look at it. Did it have a cap? Always put the cap back on. Also, if it's plastic, put the cap back on because it'll make it to the plant. Part of SB 54, the pro, will have to come in and pay for. Supposedly, it doesn't impact the jurisdiction, doesn't impact the ratepayer, doesn't impact the processor who's collecting the material or the hauler who's picking it up. It is supposed to hit the packaging manufacturer. So we're not supposed to see an increase. In fact, they're supposed to come in and augment our facilities to put the technology in to collect these types of materials and then to help us with transportation because we don't know how far we're going to have to take it to get it there. Is it in California? Is it in Arizona? Where is the facility? So then there's a whole transportation component about getting those new materials now back to the manufacturer.
Thank you. It's obviously it's like all of these subjects, you can go deep, and I think the purpose obviously of today is to stay on the surface, but I would tell you, and I think it's, I'm glad we talked about SB 54, because I think one of the things, when you're looking at municipalities, and obviously towns the size of Yountville, you're trying to determine really what's in your sphere of control, as I say, or your sphere of influence, and then we have this wide sphere of concern. In many cases, especially in California, you'll have the state legislation take on, or legislators take on these types of, what are really regional issues, and that's where they tend to kind of get shaped. But then, SB 654, I'm sure it's been in the works for, decades, when you kind of look at so, I think one of the questions as we get into budgeting and we get into prioritizing is like, where do we want to lead? Where do we want to follow? On what level do we want to, I guess, promote what we're doing too? Because I do think there's a lot to promote, but solid waste, is just such a vast subject, and I thank you for trying to explain it. I think I understand it. Hopefully most people do, but this flyer I think is really great. For those of you that didn't pick it up, grab it, because it provides a lot of great information on what the state is trying to do. But I do think, Doylene, are you in the audience? Oh, you're right in front of me. I know you wanted to speak on the subject, so is this a good time, or?
No, that was a miscommunication on my part.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I wanted our group to come and listen to the 5-minute presentation.
Oh. Okay. Well, good. Yeah, go ahead, Mark. Come on up. Anyone that is wanting to come up, feel free to raise your hand, and we'll.
Well, I'm sorry. I had it up on my phone, and I tapped what I was going to read, and it went away, but I'll wing it. I'm Mark Van Gorder, and I wasn't planning to speak on this, but I will take a moment briefly. I, this year, became the chair of an organization, if you don't know, it's called Feeding It Forward. And so I also just wanted to make say a quick statement of thanks. How lucky are we to have someone like Christy, who's so knowledgeable and can talk and represent everyone, but especially the people of Napa. I struggle sometimes to wonder why it is that we're having these conversations now and we weren't thinking about this 30 years ago, but I'm glad we're talking about it now. Napa is known for, I think, a lot of folks of being a great place to come have wine, good food, resorts, all that's great. I think a lot of people think of Napa as being a very wealthy place to live. But we have a lot of low-income and very low-income people living here in Napa. There are a lot of people who go some days with one meal and some days with no meals. So I 100% support the composting efforts, and I am super thrilled that we're taking those steps. I would just say that Feeding It Forward, if you're not familiar with the organization, the whole goal is to capture perishable foods. So if we have non-perishables, they can go to the food pantry. But perishable foods that aren't scraps left over on someone's plate, but if catering events, bottle rock, golf events, winery events, weddings, just our restaurants, and I'm kind of targeting Yountville for its food and food industry. There is so much edible food left over at the end of the night. Now, maybe it goes into the compost, but if it's sitting in a tray, and edible, we can pick it up. We can deliver it to churches, Salvation Army, other organizations, and we can help get hungry fed. So encouraging restaurateurs, caterers, event managers, and planners. I'm just going to make the pitch that we have an organization in Napa, and our mission solely is to collect that food that isn't compostable and get it the next day or overnight to people who are hungry. Just wanted to put that out there because one of the objectives of 1383 is that by 2025 is to have 20% of that compostable food that's currently going into the waste stream or for compost. Let's get it into people's hands who really could use the nourishment. Thank you.
Before you leave, can I ask you?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So since you're up here, can you put your PG&E hat on? And I've been thinking a lot about microgrids. So, microgrids, and hopefully you can kind of explain it briefly. I know there's a lot of good information on the PG&E website, especially about maybe some grants that are available. We're rural. We're in a high fire zone. I don't know if we would qualify or not, but maybe explain briefly what that is and what you think the advantages are. And, briefly, to me, it really helps with decarbonization, but also sustainability. So take it away.
Let me start off by saying that is not a brief conversation.
All right, that's fine. We can have more. Just wanted to bring this topic up and get it on the green board.
The brief, maybe I can make this part of it brief. I would say that I've had the opportunity in the last 90 days to have a very productive meeting with Manager Ralston about that topic, also with Public Works Director Ferens, and Rosalba as well. So that's been brought up. Microgrids, resilience centers, creating some resiliency in the community. It's a broad topic. I hear it fairly frequently about the idea of a microgrid. And it sounds to me a little bit sort of silver bullet-y, right? If you had a microgrid, everything would be great. So I think there's ways to look at where in the community you could set up the library, the community center, town hall with some power and some resources, critical infrastructure like pump stations and such. So we're noodling on those types of ideas and thoughts. If you hear about a microgrid currently and you read it in the newspaper, you search on Napa, you're going to hear about Calistoga. And it's a very large, it's taking some time, it's a large project, expensive project, and currently it's really set up for those high wind public safety power shutoff days. So to me, when I think the community says, aha, we have the power, we have a microgrid, now we don't need PG anymore. We can generate our electricity locally. Unless you have a very, very large solar field, that's really not the case. This microgrid up in Calistoga that they're considering, maybe they implement it 2 days or 3 days out of the year during those high fire threat events. And as it's currently proposed to operate, who knows what happens 3-4 years from now, if it's constructed and it operates, it would be that 3 or 4 days a year. So I think trying to figure out and dial in what exactly might be helpful in the way of resilience and microgrids or alternative power sources, battery backups and that sort of thing, it's tailored for each community, and that's what we're going to have to take a look at. That's as brief as I can get, I think.
Great.
And it might help. It might help just for anyone watching on the video. So I just say that I am Mark Van Gorder. I'm the local government affairs representative for Pacific Gas and Electric. Earlier, I had my feeding it forward hat on. So in case somebody's going, what just happened there?
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll echo the conversation we had with our engineer, John Ferns, and one obvious observation, because I dealt with microgrids in my previous job, but one observation where you talk about leading locally, the town of Yountville, once microgrids become feasible, and that's a huge question, is perfectly situated, right? Because, clearly we have a commercial core that's concentrated, and we have, it's such a small town. So I do think it's something we should continue to be on the forefront of, but it's really an economic issue at this stage, and as we evolve, with both generation, battery storage, and transmission, I do think there will be a point in time, I hope in my lifetime, where a microgrid makes a ton of sense. So more on that subject. Was there anything else? I know I saw a couple hands. Come on up.
Hi, I'm Myrna David, 1889 Columbard Way. This is not on either of the topics that were just brought up because I'm thinking more in terms of general climate and environmental issues. A few years ago, we replaced all of our grass with drought-tolerant plants, and I know we've just kind of come out of a drought, so there's a lot of confusion in my mind as to how to maintain our yard now that the climate change has kind of evolved. So I'd like to have our town think a little bit more about that to help us, maintain our property and our gardens. And the other concern that is related to that is the whole issue of pesticides. We still have sort of weeds growing up, and we have apple trees, and I just don't know how to manage those plants because I can't use any pesticides anymore. They're just for both. So I'd like the town to give us some insight into those issues, since many of us do maintain our own gardens and possibly need to have that kind of information. Thank you.
Thank you. I feel like there was someone behind that was. Were you ready to come up? Yeah, yep. Yeah, okay.
So I'm with her, Jim McDonald. I live on Columbard Way off of Oak Circle, and I want to bring up the subject of flood control. Every winter, the creek at Hopper Creek at Oak Circle overflows, and at least once or twice a winter, and our street gets flooded. So I'm wondering what can be done to mitigate that. I know there are pipes at Vanell, there are pipes at Three Weirs Park, but there's no piping at Mulberry, there's no piping at Oak Circle. So I think we either need some kind of pipe to draw water out, or it's a very small channel under the bridge. That bore needs to be increased to allow more water to flow. So I don't know if that's, I brought that up to the council about a year ago. I don't know that it's a topic that you've embraced, but I'd like to see it at least be considered for the next budget year to do something, because I'm assured that we're going to get flooding this winter again, and given climate change, flooding is probably going to even increase in future years. That's my
Appreciate
comment.
that, yeah. And I know that John, I'm learning about flood control here, and I think I mean, granted, there's always things you can do. We talked about resiliency under safety.
Right.
But I also know that in some cases you're designed to flood, and how you flood is kind of how you manage the system. And John's enlightened me to some degree on that. I'm sure he'd be happy to sit down with you and talk to you about that area, because we talked about that area specifically. So I would reach out to John, and then we can talk about through budgeting what options there might be available.
Okay, yeah, I'd like to do that.
Tony, did you want to come up?
And on that point, can I share something real quick?
Yeah, sure. I'm sorry.
You were away, but if you walk up Popper Creek, I think you'll be really excited to look in behind Hotel Yountville. There is so much cleared now that the water will make its way out. And, of course, the area is designed to flood, but there's going to be a huge difference this year, thanks to Director Fern's diligence and working with the hotel on getting that. It looks amazing.
Okay.
Come up that way.
But I think there are other things that we can still do.
But
so.
there should be improvements. It'll move.
Hello, my name is Tony Walcott, and I'm your new on-call arborist, which many of you I know have been looking forward to.
Welcome. Very nice to meet you.
Thank you very much. Part of the reason, though, for coming up here is that I graduated from compost school several years ago, and wanted to remind people that one of the best benefits of compost is to put it on top of your soil, and that's as it decomposes, it improves your soil quality. And I was wondering, maybe this is a naive question on my part because I don't know what happens to it, but all of the yard trimmings and the tree trimmings from tree services, the chips that go into the truck and stuff, what happens to all of that organic material that we normally think of as being composted somewhere and utilized, hopefully by the citizens that have the actual material that it's being worked on? So I'm sure there's some answers to that question.
I'm sure Christy could answer that question. Sure. And I also want to, thanks for coming up, Tony. As a preview, at the 3 o'clock regular meeting, we are going to be talking about the tree ordinance. And so those of interested in trees will get to hear Tony speak to the council during our formal meeting. But Christy, did you want to address that real quick?
Well, I can't speak specifically for each tree company. Some of the material we get and we compost, we also...
We're going to bring you a mic.
Thank you, Oprah.
We also send some material to Woodland Biomass, and they make energy out of it. So it's twofold. It's either going to, if it comes to us, it's getting composted, or it's going to Woodland Biomass and being made into energy. And I don't know about your Public Works Department and if they have a chipping program and are mulching it, spreading around town. But I do know if you talk to Miguel Garcia, he's kind of the guru around here. He will tell you that if you use wood chips and water the top, they work as whatever Roundup used to do. This is the organic solution to Roundup, is using wood chips with water, and it'll stop whatever weeds are growing in those areas.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments regarding? Yep, come on up. And then you can come up next, please.
Sorry, one more thing. So just for the lady, Myrna, who asked about what she can do to help with her yard, and everybody else in town can use it also, there is what's called the Master Gardeners of Napa County. It's a free organization. They have a help desk. They have workshops. They have a demonstration garden. They are there for you, free, with questions and with any answers you might need in your gardening. So it's made for the home gardener. So
Yep.
it's available, free.
Seems very popular up here, yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to add, they actually have a 2-hour window every day that they are there for the phone calls, because I do call them once in a while. So just like, why is my lavender plant
there's
turning
just
brown?
many ways to catch up with them at the farmers market, and we have our demonstration garden at Las Flores Community Center. So lots of answers.
Thank you. Come on up.
Alan Tincher, Jefferson Street. I like the idea of the wood chips, but I've run into a little bit of an issue with the potential of fire.
Alan, can you look forward? We want to make sure you're on TV.
Okay. So anyway, I see the fire marshal back there, and I'm hoping that I can get some clarity on this. So if we do use wood chips, they do work really well. It takes a long time to break down. You don't want to use wood chips in a vegetable garden. You want to use them under your landscape plants or your fruit trees, things like that. But if you have a pile of wood chips and we get these really dry falls and we get blowing embers, isn't that sort of looking for trouble? So that's my concern.
Chief, can you address that? Thanks.
So good afternoon, everybody. Mike Marcucci, Fire Chief here for the town of Yountville, as well as the Napa County Fire Department. Great point with wood chips, and I think the big thing to remember is if we have a pile of wood chips, that is one thing. If we are spreading them lightly and watering them, I think what was mentioned earlier, that's a difference. But we are looking at truly a zero-tolerance landscaping around the homes right now, so that is going to be, and one would preclude the other. If we don't have any vegetation around your home within 5 feet, there's nothing to put wood chips down to keep the weeds down from. So one takes care of the other, but yes, that is a very valid concern. But if you do get out past your 5 feet and you do have a single layer of chips and not a mound of them, if you will, that there's a big difference there as well. And so that is something that we can always talk about offline. Anybody in the community wants to discuss that or have a concern, the Fire Marshal's office will be happy to talk about that. So,
thank you. Come on up. Feel free to stay up, Chief, if you want to have a conversation. Sounds like he wants to follow up.
No, I think we're really not aware of what the fire marshal just said about that 5 feet of clearance. You look around these small lots in Yountville, and nobody has 5 feet of clearance. And so they're moving towards zero enforcement, zero tolerance of that. And that's going to be a huge impact on the way people landscape in town. So,
yep.
Brian, if people will please attend the October 19th event with Firewise, we'll have a strong leadership and education on that very subject.
thank you, council member. And that's, I was just going to reference that date. I'm glad you had the date because I didn't have it off the top of my head. Just to tie off onto that, and yes, so when we talk about a lot of the zero clearance, what we're calling the zero clearance or nothing around 5 feet, that is truly in the wildland urban interface. That's usually in your state responsibility areas. That's not in town. But we have also seen that fires do get into towns, especially in our North Bay area here. So readyforwildfire.org, great website that will walk you through everything. So I'll say it again, readyforwildfire.org. Step by step through the process. For town to have that, it would have to be an ordinance. It would have to be talked about, obviously. In the state responsibility area, the Public Resources Code is already moving that direction as we speak. So a little different governance model as you come into the town limits. But nonetheless, great to organize communities, neighborhoods into having, great efforts. And there's great work being done right now in our local community by, I'm going to call them landscapers. That's not the right term, but firefighter, not a landscaper. As far as what can be done to have, to beautify your yard. Everybody wants to have these great front yards, but I don't know that we live in a landscape in our Mediterranean climate that allows us to have that anymore. So again, town limits versus non-town limits, different sets of rules and such on those lines, but nonetheless, common sense, take an approach at readyforwildfire.org. So,
thank you, Chief.
Good? Okay.
Okay. Anything else before we move into, go ahead, Councilmember.
Are we going to, this is still climate, right?
We still are on climate, yes.
Okay. Okay. I just wanted to say that going along with what Robin was talking about, the fire safe educational component and the previous one that we just had on emergency preparedness, it would behoove us all to have an educational component that the town participates in workshops for exactly what we've been talking about, composting, what's plastic, what's not plastic, how to approach, how to be responsible with your consumables, and to take that further and address a lot of climate issues like trees and maintenance of trees so that we maintain our urban forest, to address some climate issues that we know that trees help us with. So it just feels like the educational approach has always been what Yountville does, but I would like to formalize that and make sure that we address it in a similar way that we're trying to address these Get Ready programs.
Mm-hmm.
And also to take another look, I think we've talked about this before, at our own climate action plan, which was in 2016, needs to be updated, and how it interfaces with what the county climate action plan will be, hopefully. And also to, as a council, make a really firm statement about we want to be sustainable, we want to be climate conscious, and we want to be resilient, and we will spend a specific budget amount towards doing that every year, because I think it's important that we place those things on the forefront and back it up with the dollars that are needed to make it happen.
Understood. Yeah, and I have the 2016 Climate Action Plan right here. I did speak this morning to David Morrison, who, as you know, for those you don't, he's the former planning director for the county, was the interim CEO, and now has been assigned to the Climate Action Committee. So there's definitely a sequence of events that's going on, starting at the county level. The GHG inventories have already been done. I learned that this morning, so that's already been accomplished. And so now they're in the process of doing RFP to bring on a consultant to work through their cap, I'll call it, even though it's a little more complicated than that. And then depending on how far that gets, then we make a decision, I think sometime mid next year, of like, do we want to invest in updating ours, or did the county get us to where we need to be? I'm guessing we're going to want to refine ours, but we're going to have to see how far the county can get. And I know you're part of that committee, council member, and I think Councilmember Tripp as well. But we'll stay connected so that we don't miss an opportunity, because these things do take a while, and that's what sometimes is frustrating, right? It's like the long emergency. You want to get something going, but you have to go through a process. But and I think, to the point of education, clearly I'm hearing a lot as it relates to best practices with landscaping and sort of homes. I think that's obviously a subject with a lot of educated folks and the master gardeners that we can work towards. And then we're going to, as I said earlier, be talking about trees later. And although those are related, our tree ordinance, as you know, is complicated as well. We're trying to get to a place with now with Tony as our advisor where we can hopefully have a model ordinance that makes sense to all sides. So we don't actually have a formal safety presentation. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm sorry. Thank you. Just quickly, thank you, Town Manager. I just wanted to, as Councilmember Reeves says, is that this council, I think our real focus has been on sustainability and resilience. And so I think anything that we do to continue and support programs is important. And I know one idea I just wanted to throw out to put on the list, because there's always some confusion for some veterans and other people about the use of electric vehicles, golf carts in town. If for our older population that need to move around, if we can look into that with and clarify the rules and allowance or whatever the town could do to help promote people to be able to move through town with golf carts and would be helpful for some. And there is a fair number of the population at the Veterans Home that have them and are not clear if they can bring them down into town. So let's look into that. Thank you.
Sure. Yes, come on.
I'm Michael Bork on Jefferson. It sounds like you're getting ready to leave climate, so I just wanted to mention one thing that I would like the council and town to consider, which is to encourage or make available the so-called superchargers for automobiles. And by that I mean non-Tesla superchargers. Electrify America, somebody like that. We own an electric car, we own a gas car, and when we go places, the first consideration that I make is whether or not it's going to be convenient and appropriate and possible for me to take my electric car where I want to go. The one I have, the first thing that I thought of is I can go to all the airports and still get home. So that was important to me, and I recognize that there's so many people are coming up to the Napa Valley and Yountville specifically. We have, I think, 8 of the level 2 chargers, but those aren't going to add enough electricity if somebody needs it to get home. If we had a supercharger available, then people who wanted to come from further distances would have an opportunity. And I mean, my understanding is especially new cars can go from 20% to 80% full in something like 10 or 12 minutes. So people would have a convenient way and could be encouraged to bring those sorts of automobiles here, shop, do whatever they want to do. And before they left town, they, plugged in. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I just wanted to mention that the County Climate Action Committee is commissioning a kind of report/map of where chargers are needed in the valley, because in the next 5 years or something, we need to put in at least 1,000 chargers in the valley to keep up with what is expected to be the influx of more electric vehicles. And I think I remember that Yountville needs 18 level 2 chargers and 1 level 3 charger, which I find weird because most new cars are now level 3 capable, and it just feels like if you have to wait 8 hours for your car to get filled up, that doesn't really address the visitor issues. And I think if we make a commitment or we start talking about what's really realistic for people is those level 3 chargers, so that we can, but the cost is incredibly different. It's like, I don't know, $10,000 for the easy one and $50,000 to $100,000 for the level 3. So it's hard on the community level, but I think we need to talk about that issue.
No, definitely. And I think that was one of the other subjects with Mark from PG&E, and I know MCE, they're all kind of trying to help with those sorts of issues. So, because it always starts with where's the power. but no, I think that's definitely a good conversation. Is there anything else? Go ahead.
On that charger point, I had forwarded Mr. Van Gorder's email to the management at Rancho. Currently, all the people with Teslas and electric vehicles line up at the park and take the chargers that we should actually have for our visitors and our guests, but they can't charge to their homes because they don't have the proper power at their house. So I've tried to get our management to actually work with PG&E. We're not a nonprofit by any means, but a community that maybe could be considered affordable, to have something in the park available for the 200 plus residents there and even Bella Vista. So we're not taking something away from the visitors.
Okay.
Before we leave climate, and I think this is a goal or a topic that we'll need to wait a while until because I am on the committee with, for the County Climate Action Committee with Pam, till we have a county plan. But I recently saw an article in the New York Times op-ed that I think says it all. It says, climate change will begin in the appliance aisle. And the point of that article being the move to electric appliances. And we heard a presentation at the Climate Action Committee that the Bay Area Air Quality Management District will be enforcing a rule in the next 2 years that all water heaters need to be electric, at least if you want to buy it in the region that's covered by the air quality, and then they're going to move on to all electric or heat pump furnaces and whatnot. And the reason I say this is I would really think long term, once we kind of know more of the rules of where the county's going, it would be very nice if the town could do some work on encouraging giving folks rebates or reductions in permit fees for electric improvements that help with climate change. And the other interesting part, and if anybody's interested, I really recommend searching for this on the New York Times, is there will be $9 billion coming through the Inflation Reduction Act, which has kind of a weird name because it's really much more about climate change and supporting a green transition. But $9 billion available just for rebates on appliances and also solar panels. And I know Mark probably knows way more than I do about that. But that much of that money, the rules and how it's going to work won't come through till 2024. So I guess I'm just saying I like to put a long-term placeholder in trying to see what our town can do to just encourage that transition through either making information about the rebates available when it becomes clear how it works, or reducing the permit fees, because I think as it stands now, to do a $1,500 water heater, it's a $200 permit fee or something. So if we were to encourage people to make that transition earlier by giving them a fee reduction, which really wouldn't hurt the town all that much for individual homeowners, something like that. So that's something I would really like to see us keep on the agenda for climate change.
Okay, thank you. All right. I know, Chief and Sergeant, I didn't ask you to present anything, but since we're shifting to safety, is there anything now that you've heard that you'd like to just announce, since we have a full group and you have a captive audience?
Sure, and thank you. So just a couple things regarding safety for the town here, especially from the fire department. Just to kind of rehash a couple of things that have happened this year is, the town has talked and voted on upping the staffing at the Yountville Fire Station, which has been nothing short of amazing. And we cannot thank the town enough for supporting and joining with the county in that. In addition to the battalion chief, that'll be added on here as soon as I can get the hiring process completed, and adding to that level of staffing as well. But the one thing I wanted to focus on is the fuels projects that have been happening and will be happening behind the Veterans Home in coordination with the Napa Community Firewise Foundation, which again will be speaking on October 19th. Okay, thank you. Here in town, and if you were to look at an overview of the Veterans Home on the western side as it looks at Dry Creek Road, there's a vineyard on either side of it, and the idea is to put in a fire break and connect the dots, if you will, from the vineyards to the north and the south, to either prevent a fire from getting up towards the Mount Veeder area, or to keep a fire, more realistically, from Dry Creek Road to coming in towards the Vets Home and into town. And that's something that CAL FIRE, I'm wearing like 3 hats right now, so I'll put my CAL FIRE hat on, that is helping fund that project as well through some grants that NCFF has put in for. Along with some other one-time monies. It's really one of those things where we're just collecting the funds. When I say we, I mean NCFF, to get that work done here, and also maintain the fire roads that go in there behind the town. Where that town limit runs is kind of a funny wedge into the hillside there. So it will be a cooperation between some county areas and some town areas through the Mount Veeder Fire Safe Council as well. The town is split between fire safe councils. There's the Napa Valley Fire Safe Council, which is really a ghost-staffed planned fire safe council, and then you have Mount Veeder, which really ends at the highway. And so that area there, all under the NCFF umbrella, is being done, which would be a great project to have completed and then maintained, which is a whole nother, I think we're estimating right now, whatever the cost is, it's about 42% to maintain it moving forward, to be able to button up that west side of town, if you will, to keep fire from moving in behind the Veterans Home, which causes a huge logistical concern, not only for the residents there, but also for the town. It puts a great strain on it if we have to evacuate the Vets Home. So just a couple things that are happening right now, and we'll catch up more at our next quarterly report to the council. So
thank you so much, Chief.
Thank you.
Sarge, you good? I'm good. Yeah, all right. Well, any issues related to safety that anyone wants to raise? Go ahead.
I think I'm going to harp on education again. We had that workshop with emergency preparedness, and it was a great turnout. But the whole thrust of that workshop was Meet Your Neighbor program. And I feel like a neighbor of mine, Jean Marciniak, and I had a neighborhood meeting for Meet Your Neighbor last Sunday. And I have to say that it was a lot of work and a relatively good turnout. But once or twice for a meeting like that isn't enough. It needs to be, you need to meet your neighbors more often in that context. And to that end, Hillary was saying that in one community she lived in before, that once a year they had open block party day, kind of like what we have Yountville yard sale day. And it just feels like that's the kind of support that these neighborhood pods could use, so that we don't have to go through all the logistics of where we're going to meet, how we're going to meet, when we're going to meet. It's just on the calendar, and these neighborhood pods can meet to re-up our relationship and our commitment to this program of self-sufficiency in your neighborhood if there is an emergency. And I think that's something that Yountville could benefit from in so many other ways, just the well-being of our neighborhoods and our each other, to have that more dependable relationship meeting, and just to get to know people you maybe don't know in your neighborhood. And it's a casual way of making that happen. So I would like to have that as a discussion point of creating something like that in town.
Okay. Thank you for the suggestion. I'm assuming Hillary Gady is who you were, or were you talking about
Hillary
Councilmember
Tripp.
Okay. So you had that type of event in another.
And it used to be, I think, a national program, but in Oakland it was neighborhood night out, and it was August 19th or something, and all neighborhoods did it, and the city kind of promoted it.
I think this is
provided
National Night
resources.
Out.
Yeah, maybe that.
Yeah, and I think, by the way, I don't know if you know, Sarge, but the sheriff did commit to doing National Night Out in Yountville this next year, which hasn't happened in a long time, as I understand. But he said he'd be glad to bring it back. So that does happen in August. It is a tradition through police departments, and it's a great event. Maybe we can couple that with, know your neighbor, because that actually would pair pretty well. So we'll talk about that.
Yeah, like a neighborhood barbecue in conjunction or something. Just a format to.
Yeah, it was originated, I don't know where, but I know somewhere back east where it, in essence, was this idea that communities were taking back their streets. So they, in essence, went out and marched the streets and took back the streets in areas that were unsafe. And so it's evolved, and now it's really more of a community type of event. But it's
we
it
probably
is a tradition.
won't march, but.
Yeah, no, it's not a march anymore. It is more of a barbecue type of thing. But at one time, it was, as I understand it, more of a march. But anyway, thank you for the suggestion. Did you have?
I do have a question. So when it comes to emergencies, they're out there. We never know when they're going to come. And I was thinking this morning of how to phrase this without being off-putting. But I feel like on a busy weekend here in town, if you're trying to get out of town and you take the California and you go under the overpass, there's cars coming from the Veterans Home and cars coming from the highway, and the tourists, you can tell they're not sure which way they're going, and there's a roadblock. And so in my mind, I'm always thinking about emergencies, and I think it's pretty clear to say that the town to the south side of Mulberry would all be trying to, in a case of an emergency, like it's a boogeyman, we don't know what it is, but we know we need to go. How on earth would we ever get out when you have, we're looking at developing the church property someday, and you've got Bella Vista, you've got Rancho, you've got Mulberry. Everybody is trying to get out through the underpass in whatever direction we want to go. And I was thinking the other day in my commute, I mean, do you guys ever talk about a plan to block traffic at, say, Oak Knoll to make sure that Hoffman Road could, and over by Bell Winery, that those exits actually could, if we needed to cross the highway and get out of town, that there would be a way to control traffic and some forethought to alleviate the pressure. So I just think of those things after being through emergencies and trying to get off the mountain on Mount Veeder. And I hope, like, heck, we'll never need it, but...
So just at an office level in the town of Yountville, the answer is we don't. There's not a lot of discussion about it. There is an emergency manual which has various plans for various incidents, but as you said, we don't know what the incident is. So an incident at that location, we're not going to direct people. It's just dependent on the incident. Right. In my experience, and I'm sure the chief has the same experience, during those incidents, we will identify a way out, and that's passed along to residents. So if we're doing fires is the best example. We've done several of these over the past few years. Deputies are directed when they go to the door to identify a route out for the people and where they should go and where the community centers are for them. So that's and then Everbridge, Nixle, the various computer programs that now will send out notifications via phone. Those will identify routes, but I don't think there's no specific one. So we haven't talked about something at the overpass, how we would send people out. It comes down to the individual incident. Yeah. So we do have multiple routes out of town.
Because that frontage road is a dead end. It just is like that whole side of town.
Right. So we do have a multitude of resources when something like, especially if it was just a town of Yountville incident. We have the sheriff's office here in Yountville, which is just a couple of us, but then we have a 100-person plus department with the sheriff's office. We have CHP officers right in town. We have the fire department available, and public works, and so those things do happen, and we do tabletop exercises. We did a tabletop for a theoretical, like a dam break. That was just 6 months ago up at the Veterans Home, and so we do tabletop these exercises, but can't.
Yeah, I was going to add to that. Thank you, Sergeant.
Yeah,
and Chief, you can chime in. But one thing that's clear to me, again, in my early initial assessment, is that being in the heart of the valley gives us a lot of benefits in terms of the resources that are available throughout the valley. And on top of that, having the sheriff's office and then CAL FIRE, which obviously is, I don't know how many firefighters you have. I mean, they're
12,000.
12,000 firefighters. I mean, you generally have a lot of resources. Where in my previous jurisdiction, you have a police and fire department. It's a little bit more of a challenge, and you do rely on mutual aid and such. But most importantly, every incident's different. And so, the first thing when there's an incident, they stand up the EOC, the Emergency Operations Center. There's an incident commander, and they start to make those calls based on the training they've received. And they're pretty good at it. And so it always depends. And I do think that, traffic control is a big piece of that in my experience. So
yeah. So just to tag on to that a little bit. So in my previous job, I was an incident commander on one of our management teams, and I actually signed the paperwork to evacuate South Lake Tahoe during the Caldor fire in 2021. And so with that was a planned event. So there's really two types of evacuations. So when the sheriff's department and the fire department are standing there, we're the ones that are really saying, in a fire situation, we always talk about fires, but we could talk a natural gas leak, we could talk a flood, we can talk weather events, civil disturbance, we can go down the line, but let's talk about fires because that's just the coolest thing. So, so we'll talk about fires. So in that instance, if we have to, we either have the fire is here, we've got to get everybody out of the way, it's time to go, we're knocking on the door, the high-low sirens are being played by law enforcement, it is time to get out of here. Then there's the planned event. And so if we had a fire that started, for example, on Mount Veeder that was going to move down into the towards the east into town, that would probably be somewhat of a more of a planned event. And if that case, to answer your question from your original example, we would coordinate shutting down potentially the highway to divert traffic back towards Napa, or even stopping it in Napa to where it just couldn't get up to Yountville to allow those egresses to clear themselves naturally over time. We never want to evacuate at night. We never want to evacuate with very little notice. Those are things that we do not like to do. Do they happen? Absolutely, they happen every day. But if we can do a planned event where we can give plenty of notice, where we say, hey, we're going to evacuate the town tomorrow at 3 p.m., so if you're going to go. And then we're going to come door to door and we're going to evacuate this section. We can take all those precautions. And we did that, for example, in South Lake Tahoe. And we evacuated the town. They had already set up through their Everbridge, through Zone Haven and everything, their zones. And they went zone by zone by zone. And they got elderly, people that have mobility issues, the same thing. It's almost like loading a plane backwards. Okay. Everybody that can't get on a plane goes first, and so those kinds of things. That's the planned event. The other event where it's like, holy cow, we've got to get out of here, that's the one that we're going to face a problem, and there's not much we can do about it because that is a bottleneck right there at the undercrossing. There's no lights that we can control the direction of traffic. There's nothing we can do because all we do is push that problem down the road. So that is probably something that needs to be looked at down the road. But we know about it, so we can't be surprised when it happens. So how do we deal with that? That's, I guess, a whiteboard issue that shall help you out. There's a whiteboard issue for
Yeah,
you,
just talking about it all together. I really appreciate it. I know you guys are on it, and we feel very safe because of it. But
we struggle getting under it coming into town for calls on the weekend. The truck or the engine's trying to get under. Those are big vehicles. I'd love to talk about golf carts, but how to get into town is a struggle for us as well as getting out. So that is definitely a problem.
So it's in this format. It's great to have the conversation. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So just to speak real quickly, we do have other ways out. I think of when the suburban propane incident where with my wife and our 3 small daughters were leaving on Yountville Crossroads as people were walking towards that incident. Very scary. But anyway, we have avenues out. The Crossroads was a quick way to get to Napa when we knew we didn't want to be within 100 yards of a propane incident.
And you bring up a great point, Vice Mayor, where you should always know 2 ways out, not only out of your home, but out of your community as well. There are very few back roads, we'll call them, through Yountville that aren't Yount Street or Washington to be able to traverse around to get out of town through Fennell and the other roads that'll take you other directions and such. And so being locals here and being either full-time residents, you should have more than one way out. And it really delves into the whole what happens when it comes time to evacuate. Where are you if you're at home and your loved ones are at work, or vice versa? Kids are at school, husband or wives at work. How do we meet up afterwards? Where are we going to go? Cell phones, can't count on them. Traffic jams, what are we going to do? Who's going to grab what? This is the time of year to start planning that right now because we are moving into October. It is a devastating time for California for fires. So this is a great conversation to dovetail into having that conversation for the viewers in your community right now to start working on those plans.
On October 24th, we will all get Red Cross ready together.
I didn't know that date either, but I knew you were going to chime in. So anyway, thank you.
We have 19. Yeah, come on up. The only thing I would add, and I know you know this, Chief, but in many cases, well, I should say in some cases, sheltering in place is really the best practice. And so sometimes that's a message. And you saw incidents like in Houston where everyone evacuated, but they got onto roads that flooded. And sometimes, the message of shelter in place is the message you got to get out because a lot of people are looking for a way out, and it's not always the safest way. Go ahead.
Hello, I'm Doug Haig on Oak Circle, and I guess Lahaina is still foremost in a lot of our minds, and I too worry about the evacuations. It seems like the community has a number of subdivisions that are isolated by themselves that purposely don't have a road to connect, so you can't go the back way through into Heritage Project. You can't get out of Vintage Development. There's 60 homes and 40 townhomes down the street from me in the Vintage Development, and they all have to go by my house on Oak Circle. Otherwise, I think there's opportunities. Maybe we could put it on the board to consider alternative routes in emergencies to access safe passage. But that's a concern of mine, and so that's why I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Brad, I have a quick comment. So, sure. I think to that point, I think just making people aware that when we do our Safe Streets plan every year, or every time we have to do a general plan. Part of that, there are a lot more evacuation routes, and people may realize, like specifically you mentioned, like when Toyon Terrace, there's no way to get over to Heritage or wherever. There's actually is a path. It kind of looks like a little park, and it's got some bollards right now there, but they pop out easily, and it's wide enough for a car, and you're right on Heritage. So really identifying those. So now that we've got people's awareness up, they really know about some of those things, because there's several of those around that just aren't obvious, but they are available, because it's all part of to get our Safe Streets program approved.
So residents could pop those out if needed? Yes.
I think it would typically be law enforcement that would do it, but or fire department.
A fire truck can run over them anytime. They're just designed for that, and pop them out as well.
Yep.
And so that curb is low enough for a fire truck to get over to.
Yeah. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. So I have a quick question. The chief, I think, referenced Nixle, and I was remembering in 2017 that we had no cell coverage in Yountville. We were knocked out. So my question is, has there been any consideration for building or putting up a permanent cell tower within town?
I haven't heard that. I'll look into that. I do know that as we evolve into 5G, the antennas are getting smaller and closer together, so I'm not sure when we're scheduled. But I know that wave is making its way through California, so that would likely resolve the issue, but that may be years away. I'm not sure. So, but I think that's a great question.
Maybe a wrap up, because I know.
Yeah, I was going to say, it looks like everyone's, and it's been great. So I think it's, hopefully you view it as a success. Obviously we've taken pretty much the whole 2 hours, and I think we've covered a lot of ground. So we'll take all these notes. Gene, I don't know if there's any final remarks you wanted to come to the mic and.
Congratulations. This was an excellent exercise, and lots of good comments and questions. And I put them up here. My handwriting is not always perfect, but I can read it. And what I'll do is I'll take these notes, draft them up, and give them to Brad, and make any corrections or changes. The only other thing that I'd suggest is that if you think of something later, hold on to it, maybe bring it up at a future council meeting, or there'll be another meeting in November, or send it to city staff. Just as ideas occur, a meeting like this is not your only venue for communication. Your council and staff welcome communications in as many different forms as you can offer. And so just because you didn't think of it today,
yeah.
it might come up later.
And just with that, I'm going to go ahead and ask the council for a motion to adjourn.
Okay.
Can we get a motion and a second to adjourn today's meeting?
I move to adjourn today's meeting.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 But Mayor, just one quick comment, because we've been talking about our last two speaker series on emergency preparedness. We've mentioned it on and off. October 19th, Thursday, Firewise, learn how to protect ourselves around our homes with fire. October 24th, Red Cross. It's a part of a 3-series emergency preparedness, and then hopefully we'll maybe into the spring find ways to have workshops to talk more about meet your neighbor.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And lastly, thank you all for being here.
Council will be back here in 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
A minute break.
For the audience.